Hey guys, welcome to Jimmy G Caravan Pro. Today I'll be talking with one of my best mates. We met on the road travelling in our vans. Brad will share his story as to some problems they encountered during the process of buying their van. I truly hope this gives you some great value. For amazing tools to help you on your caravan journey, head to jimmygcaravanpro.com. Enjoy and happy travels. Hey guys, Jimmy here with you, and welcome to another episode of our Jimmy G Caravan Pro series. In this video today, I'll be sitting here with one of my really good friends. His name's Brad. We met on the road traveling. We built up a really good relationship, a great friendship with not only my wife and his wife, but just our families in general. We enjoyed hanging out. We had such a great time together. Now, the reason I've got Brad here on camera today is that we want to have a conversation about the process of buying a new caravan, whether it's new or secondhand. We really want to make sure that we know what we're looking at, and we want to make sure that we actually get what we're buying. So Brad's going to share his experience today, and unfortunately they went through a bit of a rough experience buying their new caravan. I'm not going to tell any part of the story, but first of all, I just want to say welcome, Brad.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Thanks
Thank you for having me on, mate.
No worries.
Excited to be here, and hopefully what I share today can help some of you on your own journey, because it is a journey, and it's for me, I didn't know much about caravanning or anything at all before I started on this path. And yeah, I guess the intention for us jumping on today is to just share openly what we've been through, and then yeah, hopefully you can avoid the same mistakes that we did.
First of all, I just want to start, Brad. So do you want to just talk a little bit about your background? What actually planted the seed with you guys deciding to go traveling? You sold everything up, and yeah, if you'd like to start there.
Yeah, it's been an amazing journey. So originally we're from Melbourne. So during the period of COVID, during those 2 years of COVID lockdowns, it was pretty one of those rock bottom moments where, you know, a bit of a dark night of the soul, being locked up like monkeys in a cage. And it was real soul searching. We actually decided to sell our house. So I've got two young kids. I've got Lockie, who's 11, I've got Jazzy, who's 8, and Chad, to my wife. We'd actually just finished building a brand new house. So we'd done all the landscaping and just finished the decking, and we made it all look pretty mint, and we were happy with it. We were very comfortable, right? And then my poor wife, one night I was just over the whole COVID thing. I was over being locked down, and I actually had a dream that we were going to sell our house and we were going to buy a brand new car, brand new caravan, hit the road and do a lap around Australia. So I had this real inspiration, and I'm like, how am I going to tell my wife about this? Anyway, cut a long story short, I convinced her to sell. It took about 12 months. We sold our house, and we were super pumped, and we decided to buy a new car, new caravan, and we worked out a bit of a plan of how we were going to travel around Australia, just roughly where we were going to go. And so we bit the bullet. And at that time during COVID, everyone was wanting to buy a caravan. So it literally was a 15-month process from putting down the initial deposit and committing that we were going to do it. And then to, a lot of obstacles and hurdles and challenges, which we'll go into soon, to actually make it happen, where we eventually picked up the van. And incredible trip. It's been 18 months now. We've done 45,000 Ks traveling around Australia.
That's cool.
From Melbourne, we went all the way up the East Coast, all the way up to the tip of the Cape. So amazing up there. And then all the way back down to Melbourne again for Christmas. And then we ended up going to South Oz, up to the Flinders Ranges, and then back down. We did all the peninsulas to WA, all the way up to Exmouth, which is amazing. The Fitzroy Crossing was closed, unfortunately, so we couldn't do NT. Came back down again, and then up through the middle, did Uluru, Kings Canyon, and then out back Queensland, and now we're here on the sunny coast. So yeah, it's been an amazing journey. Many lessons along the way. Best thing we've ever done, even though we're going to be sharing some pretty traumatic experiences. It has been an incredible journey, and wouldn't change it for the world. Selling our house, best thing we ever did, letting go of that safety and security, and just taking a leap of faith, and just we've been very much in flow. We haven't planned out too far in advance the whole time, and it's been a massive growth experience. So yeah.
Cool. Righto, thanks for sharing that, mate. As you can see, so Brad and his family, they're not part-timers, they are full-timers. Yeah. They're still living in their caravan. Yeah, a whole family. So when I say 2 kids, husband and wife, living in their caravan on the road full-time, That's not taking it lightly. It's not going away for the weekends or anything. So Brad can definitely talk firsthand. Righto, so we'll get into the nitty gritty. Okay, Brad, so how did you and your wife actually get into the process of buying a new van? What did you guys start doing? Was it the shows? Yeah, if you could just talk about that experience, please.
Yeah, good question. So for us, before we even decided to sell up and to hit the road, we actually did a lot of research from YouTubers initially. I think it was Trip in a Van initially. We followed their adventures, and yeah, they're obviously a family of 5 and been on the road for a lot of years. And we just started watching the places they'd been to. We looked into the van that they were using, and then just a lot of YouTube videos, to be honest. There was a lot of searching and finding different families that had done what we wanted to do, and then that just started to open up our minds and our eyes to a whole new way of living. So I had no idea about caravanning. We'd done a lot of camping with, but our setup was like a 6x4 cage trailer with a canvas top and a massive tent, and we'd done tenting for years now. It was glamping. It was like we had the gazebo, the outdoor kitchen, we had the tent, we had the full setup, but we'd never actually been caravanning. So I'd never towed anything more than a 6x4 trailer. So yeah, we just did a lot of research about the families, like different places that you could go and visit. We went to some caravan camping shows, that sort of thing. You know, toured some of the vans, got a feel for them, and yeah, just weighing up the costs and, you know, things like that. It's like, as you know, Jimmy, it's pretty overwhelming when you're starting out. Yeah, I had no background in it. I didn't grow up caravanning either, so I had no reference point of what it took to get into the caravanning side of things. Yep. And there's a lot to learn. So lucky we've got you, Jimmy.
It's a huge learning curve. We've all gone through it, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Just so much research, hey? Yep. And a lot of it, I just had no idea what I was getting myself into. But it's worth it. Like, looking back 18 months now on the road, it's been amazing. But yeah, we made a lot of mistakes along the way, and we learned a lot about the industry and how it has gone through a massive boom. Yep. But like with most business, when there's a massive boom, there can be some challenges in terms of, you know, these things are mass produced now. And when they're churning out 40, 50 vans a week, yep, there's often a lot of things that are missed. Yep. And the quality assurance process is probably not up to scratch, and that's what we found out with our experience, you know.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so today we're not going to be talking or naming any brands.
No names.
No, so we're going to keep that all separate, and that is up to you guys. Hopefully after this video you'll have a few more tips of what to look for when you go and buy your caravan. So to ask you now, how did you guys come about making the decision to pick the brand that you did?
Yep. So it came down to a few things for us. It was, one thing was price. You know, obviously you can pay 150, 200 grand for the type of van that we were looking for. We got 2 kids, obviously. We wanted a bunk van. Yep. There were certain things that we wanted included that sort of, you know, especially for my wife, she wanted a certain plan, a certain layout, so that came into it. We did want an off-road van. So obviously when you're looking at off-road vans, the price goes up to another level. But we didn't want to spend, you know, 100, 150 grand on a van. So we were looking at, you know, below 100 grand, but we wanted off-road, and yeah, and we basically wanted something that looked good, was, you know, ticked all the boxes in terms of the basic functionality. Sure. And to be honest, we didn't know a lot about the ins and outs. We did want a proper battery setup. We wanted solar. We wanted to do a lot of off-grid camping as well. Yep. So that was important to us as well. Yeah, sure. But looking back on it, we really didn't have the skills or the knowledge to know what to ask when it came to batteries and setup. I'd done a bit of research on YouTube about, you know, lithium. We decided we want a lithium setup, obviously lighter and benefits with that. We didn't really know how much solar we needed or how much batteries, and the people we brought it off weren't really forthcoming with that information. Yep. So yeah, to sum all that up, off-grid was the main thing for us. Sorry, off-road. Yep. Something that looked good, something that was going to get the job done, and the plan and the layout was really important. Yep. So we ended up going with an option where we had the queen bed front of the van. Yep. As you walked in at the back, we had like an ensuite with the bunks, yep, and then obviously the kitchen, living area with the club lounge in the middle. So that was a pretty straightforward plan that would that seemed to tick the boxes for us.
So then leading into lead times as well, there was quite a wait for you. You guys had 9 months. Was it that you had to wait?
15 months.
Oh, 15 months, right. Yep.
Well, this is the thing. So
Yeah,
I will
sure.
talk about this. So when we first put the deposit down,
Yep.
we were told that it would be about 9 months.
Okay.
But then there was 6 months of delays and challenges and promises and yeah, to be ready by this time. And then we get a call, oh, sorry, it's going to be another month and then another month. So this was one of the things that the first lessons, I guess, is that we sold our house and settled on our house, assuming that what they told us would be accurate and assuming that we'd pick up our van. And it was probably a bit naive on our behalf because we were just like planning it all out and the dates and all of that sort of thing. We're definitely not the only ones that have been impacted by delays, because it was during COVID. There were external influences, so
Having trouble getting parts.
yeah,
and things
parts,
like that. Yeah,
and
yep.
it's pretty common in the industry at that time where there was extended delays. But one thing that we weren't overly happy with was the lack of communication. So we weren't kept up to date that, oh, well, this part's going to be, another month or another 2 months. It was always us calling them and asking them and following up. And every time would be a different story.
Yep.
And then often lying to us saying, yeah, it's ready to go. It'll be ready to pick up next week. And then months later, it still wasn't ready, Yep. So the communication was the first really big letdown, a breakdown in communication. And what often happens in the caravan industry is that you've got your seller or your main salesman, which we were dealing with primarily, and their role is obviously to sell caravans, right? And there's often a breakdown in communication from the seller to the manufacturer.
Yep.
So often the breakdown is from the manufacturer to the seller, and obviously the seller doesn't know what's going on.
Yep.
And now you're dealing with third parties, and that's where the customer is often the one to cop the brunt of it, because we have no idea what's going on, and often the seller has no idea, and one person's handballing into the next, and you end up with going around in circles, right?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yep. And obviously, like you said, you were chasing them all the time.
Yeah.
They weren't contacting you, so it made it even worse,
That's
right?
it.
And it made you feel even worse because you shouldn't have to be
Yeah.
chasing them all the time.
Yeah.
They should be keeping you up to date with what's going
Exactly.
on and being honest with you.
That's it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
So there wasn't any honesty, transparency. If someone's honest and they say, look, we're having these dramas
Yeah.
due to X, Y, Z, then we're understanding, But it's when you're expecting something to be delivered at a certain date and then that doesn't happen and there's no communication about it, that's what is a big letdown. So our house ended up settling around about January, and we didn't end up, and we were supposed to get the van then. We didn't end up getting the van until April. So we ended up buying a Jayco Swan pop-up sort of camper trailer and traveling around Victoria for 3 months, just sort of like treading water while we waited for the van to be ready.
Okay, so initially when you first put the order down, you thought you were going to have plenty of time up your sleeve because they said 9 months.
Yeah.
And you thought that's plenty of time. We'll still be in the house before we sell
Yep.
it. But because it pushed out
further delays.
nearly doubled in time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what really put the stress on because you'd sold your house and
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And
that's
the
a hard
challenge,
one.
the challenge was like selling a 5-bedroom house, and we had so much crap that we've gone much more minimal now. But all of that stuff that we had, and then we had to put some of it in storage, and then some of it we had to squeeze into a tiny camper. And it's like, what do you do with all the other camping stuff, which a lot of you would relate? You buy a lot of stuff when you're about to do a trip around Australia, right? So it's like, where do we put things? And yeah, it was a bit of a drama.
Let's jump right into the story then. Do you want to give us a run through of sort of how it all unfolded when you went to pick up the van?
Yeah.
It's a pretty severe story, guys. Pretty upsetting for these guys. They just forked out a lot of money. It's a lot of money for a caravan, and I'll let you take it away, mate.
Yeah.
Run us through it.
So I've still got some PTSD from this, and I might need to breathe through this. It's all good. It was a big learning curve, but it was very, very frustrating, like as we're going through it. So basically, we were told that it would be ready on a set date. We were told that multiple times, which I've already mentioned. It was delayed. Anyway, finally, the day came, we went to pick up the van. So we were like very excited, finally there, and we're like, awesome. So we pick up the van, everything looked good. Mistake number one, I didn't check everything properly in terms of the weights when I picked it up. So what I should have done, the little, what do they call it, that little card that sits in where it says the tow ball weight and everything?
Yeah, your specification or compliance plate.
Yeah.
Yep.
Guys, tip number one, check the compliance plate before you pick up your van to make sure the weights are all good.
Yep.
And I didn't check it. We just hooked it up because we were so excited. And
as you do, right?
Yeah,
you know, your brand new vans
pumped.
there.
Yeah,
definitely.
We were really excited. The kids were so excited. They're jumping on all the bumps.
And it looked good, yeah.
We're getting our Instagram stories like, how good is this, right? So, so we hook it up. We drive back to my mum and dad's because obviously we didn't have a home. We're homeless. We'd already sold the Jayco Swan, so that was gone. And anyway, we decided to, instead of just heading off on the big trip, we decided to do a week. So we wanted to do a week where we just wanted to test out the van at a place called Bright in Country Vic. And so we fully loaded everything up at mum and dad's. I had the bikes mounted on the front toolbox, like just
where they designed?
Yeah.
That you asked them about
That's
that?
what I asked them. I said, I actually told them I want to put 4 bikes with a much heavier rack. We ended up going with a lighter rack and only 2 bikes, so less than what we said. We had a generator in the toolbox as well. We had 2 gas bottles at the front, which we topped up. So we did everything as if we were going on our proper trip, but just less stuff basically. So we loaded it all up, and I'd done a lot of research about weights, right? And that was our biggest concern is we're going to be right on the limit of the weights. Just to let everyone know, I've got a Mazda BT50. We got a full GCM upgrade because the standard GCM was about 5.95 from memory, and the upgrade took it to 6.9. So basically get an extra tonne.
And you can do that in Victoria. I don't know what other states, but in Victoria you can do that.
That's it. So in Victoria, it was a demo model BT50, so it only done 2,000 Ks. It had already been registered, so I was able in Victoria to do a GCM upgrade after registration, whereas I know in Queensland you can't do that, right? And many other states. So I got that. So I'm like, overall weight I wasn't concerned about. But the 2 things that I was a little bit concerned about was the downbore weight on the tow ball. And also the overall weight, which with our van, it was 3.3 was the overall mass.
So they're the ATM,
the
so
ATM.
that's including the tow ball?
Yep.
So
the ATM 3,300, and we didn't really, we'd done, like we'd weighed everything that we were going to put in the van. We'd worked out roughly what our weights would be. But anyway, we were fully loaded up. The first thing we did, and this is probably tip number 2, first thing I recommend when you pick up your van and you fully load it, is go straight to a weigh bridge. The amount of people who I've met over the last 18 months that have never weighed their van is mind-blowing. And no judgment, but it's mind-blowing because what people don't realise is that if they have an accident and they're overweight or their weights are out, number 1, you won't be covered by insurance because they will weigh your van straight away. This happened to people that we know. They'll weigh your van. If you're a kilo over, 5 kilos over, whatever it is, then they won't cover you on insurance. Not only that, if you, God forbid, cause harm to someone else, say if you have an accident and someone sadly dies as a result of that negligence, then you can actually be sued as well if you've got if you're towing an illegal van as well. So it's pretty serious, guys. And we were amazed, probably 80-90% of people that we met were either overweight knowingly or they'd never weighed their van. So it's a huge number, right? So we were very conscious of that because we heard horror stories about it. So we went straight to a weigh bridge. We drove 20 minutes. So we drove our van onto the weigh bridge, and the overall weight was all right? We were just on the 3.3 tonne, but on the ball was 600 kilos. So we were 600. So with my BT50, every car's different. The BT50 is a maximum of 350.
Which you'll find, everyone knows. Most cars are like that.
Some are 300, I think, but most are 350.
Most of the dual cab utes,
So
and the Land Cruisers and things like that,
So 600, and I nearly threw up. And I said to my wife, this can't be right. We actually called up the weighbridge operator and said, well, this is wrong. We drove around. He said, do another lap. So we did another lap, set it all up again, and we did again, 600. We then called the Caravan salesman, called him up. He said to us on the phone, there's no way that can possibly be right. He said, that's an error. The weighbridge isn't working, da-da-da. And we said, mate, we've been on twice. This is exactly what it is. So 250 kilos over the tow ball. So I'm lucky my whole chassis didn't bend in the 20 minutes driving there, right? And the stress that put on my car.
Away.
Well, you imagine what most people will do, or a lot of people, they've never weighed their van. So we could have potentially driven around Australia with an extra 250 kilo on the tow ball, which is so dangerous, right? And the van was swaying because the weights was so far out. It just felt really bad on the roads. Anyway, this caravan salesman said, can't be possible. And then he said, oh, wait a second, open up your tunnel boot. And he said, read out the compliance plate. So he was smart enough to do that. I should have looked at that. And he said, so what is the, you might have to help me out with the wording here. So the maximum, the current tear tow ball weight, is it called?
I'm not sure if it's tear tow ball weight, but they should have a figure there that says tow ball weight.
Tow ball weight empty. It's basically
empty
tow ball weight.
Yep.
And it's 310 kilos. Now just think about this. 310 kilos empty. And then we loaded 2 bikes. We loaded the bike rack, filled 2 gas bottles. We added a generator, which weighed 28 kilos by itself. We added everything in the tunnel boot, because obviously everything forward of the axle is going to add to the tow ball weight. So we loaded that full of my paddleboard and all these things, which we had communicated with them that that's what we wanted in there.
And they said it was no worries.
He said,
at all.
no worries. He actually said to me, which was a lie, he said to me, no worries, I've sent, because I sent him an email with, this is what we want to do. This is where the bikes will be. It's roughly this weight. I broke it all down in an email. And he said, no worries. When we manufacture the Caravan, we can move the tyre, the axles forward or back. And he said, like, you move it 1 inch and it can make a huge difference with the weight on the ball. So he said all that. So I just took him at face value for his word that, okay, sweet.
As you do though, right?
Yeah, as you should.
Yep.
So then when we said to him it was 310 empty, he started freaking out. This salesman, he's like, oh no, that he said that should be closer to 200, 220, nowhere near 310. He said as soon as you add a bike, a couple of bikes,
you add anything to it, right?
Anything. And mind you as well, the fridge was forward of the axle. So once you got a full fridge, you add all your bedding in the front, because our bed was at the front of the van. You add your clothes.
Put stuff under the bed.
250 kilos over. So this was a big problem.
Yeah, massive problem.
A big problem.
Yeah.
And we, they said, we called the caravan. So the caravan owner, the caravan salesman called the factory and he said, we've got a massive problem here. This caravan has been engineered wrong. And it was a problem in engineering that basically they'd put some of the heavier items like the water tank, which we fully loaded the 2 water tanks as well, which was 2 by 95 litres. So that's 190 kilos right there. So the 2 water tanks were forward of the axle. Also the batteries were forward of the axle as well. So the heavier things, as well as the fridge, that contributed to the massive amount of weight on the tow ball. So anyway, calls to the factory. They freaked out as well. They said, oh, look, you're going to have to bring it in. So the next day I had to drive it again, completely illegally. My poor old BT50. Had to drive it in another 30 minutes to the main factory.
With all your stuff in it still, because you had nowhere else to put it, right?
We had all of our stuff loaded in the van. We had to pull it all out and put it on the factory floor, on this concrete floor. Everyone's looking at us saying, what's happening here? So all of our stuff, including food, because we got stocked up, out onto the concrete floor. And we had to leave it there for, I believe it was about a week, so this is the next thing. So the owner, because he knew how serious it was, and I was pretty peed off by now, I was saying I want to speak to the owner. So he comes down in his suit and tie and everything. And I said, mate, you've really stuffed this up, haven't you? And he started to make all these lies up and started to put the blame back on us. And said, well, when you do a custom build, then this is what can happen. I said, mate, the only thing that we changed from your plan was we put in a concertina door. That doesn't affect weight. And a few very minor little tweaks. I said, we haven't done a custom build at all. And then he went red in the face because I was really forceful because I knew he was trying to wiggle his way out of it. And then he said, all right. And he cracked it a bit and he said, I'll give you a full refund. Yeah, so when he offered us the refund, it sounds great in theory. Oh, I'll give you a refund. And from his perspective, it was like, I just want to get rid of this problem and I'll do whatever it takes. So he's like, I'll give you a refund, hoping we just say, oh, yeah, sure. And then we'll walk out. Well, that wasn't going to happen because obviously, like I've already mentioned, that we waited 15 months to get this van and so many emails and so many follow-up calls. And it's the process of building a new caravan. It's like building a house. You got to choose your colours. You got to choose, everything about the caravan was our own energy and our own ideas and concepts. So for us to just pull the pin, take the refund, we would have had to start from scratch. Yep. We were basically homeless. We were homeless. We're waiting for our trip to begin, which was already delayed by 4 months from when we sold our house.
Which you're extremely excited about, right?
We're so
you can't
excited.
wait to get away, yeah.
You can imagine 2 kids, right? So at the time they were 10 and 7, and all they want to do is hit the road. Yeah. And we're saying, yeah, next week, and we're doing this for months. So you can imagine all the stress around that as well. And my wife was obviously very emotional, and I'm like, that's not an option. We can't just take a refund and then who knows how long it's going to take to get another van. Yep. So we're like, all right. And I just went into solutions mode. I said, guys, we need solutions. We need them now. Yep. We've been stuffed around enough. And the owner was getting all squirmy. I'm like, mate, we didn't request a custom build. This is a standard build. We had a few modifications. I said, what are you going to do about it? And I had to be really strong with him because otherwise he would just weaseled his way out of it. So I said, who can we speak to? Because he wasn't technically minded. He didn't know enough about caravans. He's just the big wig that sits behind the desk, right, with the big dollars. So I asked him, can we speak to team leaders, project managers, caravan builders, whoever we need to speak to, let's get them here. So he got all these people in. And I said, guys, this is the problem. Obviously, this has been ticked off without proper compliance. Because if they had seen that it was 310 kilos on the ball empty, then that would have been red flags, right? But they missed that. They either missed it or they tried to sweep it under the carpet, hoping no one would find them. Yep. So that was a really big issue. I said, what can we do about this? So then they started coming up with these ideas. So one of the ideas was to move the bikes from the front toolbox, right near the drawbar, move it to the back of the van. So obviously the goal with these solutions they came up with was to move the weight from the front of the van to more to the back so it balances out the weight. Because obviously our biggest issue wasn't so much the overall weight, it was more the weight that was on the tow ball. Yep. So solution number 1, brand new Grip Sport bike rack worth about $2,500. They installed that on the back of the van. They extended the bar, so they installed that, and then the bikes went back there. So that brought some weight back. Number 2, they moved one of the 95-litre water tanks to the back of the van, so that shifted from the front of the axle to the back of the axle. So that was number 2.
And it was the very front one, so it was very forward.
That's it. Yep. So that alone, it's almost 100 kilos moving from the front to the back. So obviously that lifts it up again. Then the batteries, they moved from the front or forward of the axle to the back of the van as well. So they did that. And the other thing they did was they increased the ATM from 3,300 to 3,500. Yep. So they did that by upgrading the brakes. Yep. And I think you might know better than me, I think it went from 12 inch to 15 or something like that, right, okay. Which increased the ATM, which we're actually really grateful for that upgrade because it gave us an extra 200 kilos to travel around Australia with, which, to be honest, with our family of 4, we would really struggle to keep it below 3,300 without that upgrade. So that was a really good benefit. So it was a Band-Aid solution. It was something that wasn't ideal. It's not ideal having a water tank right at the back. But we were faced with a decision at that time. We had to sort of accept it because the alternative was more delays, more unknown, and when would we eventually get on the road? Yep.
Could have been another 12 months down the track.
It could have been 12 months.
Yeah.
So
even buying a second-hand van at that time was difficult as well.
That's it, mate.
There's
nothing
all the work
on the market
on the new van as well, so you're excited to get a new van.
Exactly. It had our colours, had our design, had all the things. So you get emotionally attached to these things, and so. Whether we made the right call, I don't know, but we ended up saying, all right, if you can do what you've just told us you can do, then we'll accept it. And then we ended up staying back at my mum and dad's for another week while it took them a week in the factory to fix everything. And so fast forward, we waited for a week. we picked up the van, the bikes were at the back, the water tanks were moved. You know, they did everything they said they were going to do. We hooked up. We drove straight to a weighbridge again. We weighed it, and we were like pretty nervous to see what it would come out at. And it was literally bang on. Like, good, on the tow ball it's about 320. And the overall, we didn't end up testing it for a week. We ended up saying, bugger it, we'll just go on our proper trip now. And our overall weight was about 100 kilos under. So all up, you know, we hit the road, you know, feeling pretty good. Like, okay, we sort of dodged a bullet. So that's what happened.
Yeah, so as you can imagine, guys, that is like pretty traumatic that you have to get all of your own personal belongings and sit them on the factory floor. I just couldn't imagine having to do that. Pretty upsetting. But also the solutions that they did, obviously it got them on the road, and obviously they were willing to work with them after all this stuff happened. But before that, you know, it wasn't ideal. And the other thing I'd say that we know it's Band-Aid solutions. So unfortunately for Brad, they've moved a whole heap of weight to the back of the van. So anyone that knows about trailerless weight, we want to keep as much weight over the axles as possible, and that's the way they try to design vans. And we all know that putting weight in a caravan is a juggling act, right? You've got to try and put in the best locations you can so it's as close to the axles as possible, and also keep the good amount of tow ball weight. But yeah, it's a bit of a tough one for you guys, but it got you on the road, and it got you at the right weight on your tow ball. And it seemed to tow quite well. There was no issues with it. Hey, so
we had no issues with towing. Like it's always towed really, really well. You know, we've been very conscious of distributing weight within the van, and that side of things has been no dramas.
Okay, right. So that's awesome, mate. Now, I'm so stoked she's got on the road, otherwise I wouldn't have met you. And it's just funny how it works out like that. But let's fast forward now to, you have had more issues on the road. So let's just, obviously when we met too, we went through some of your issues as well. If you wouldn't mind just touching on a few of those and how they've occurred and what's actually happened.
Yeah, for sure, mate. So the first main issue, first of all, I want to shout out to Jimmy because he's an absolute legend, because we met somewhere out back Queensland, wasn't it?
We met at Hewenden.
Hewenden,
of all places, in the free camp out there.
Out in the middle of nowhere.
And we were just driving off when we went and said good day.
Yeah. So we literally parked right next to each other, and just, you know, as you do, like-minded people, we just hit it off and shared this story with Jimmy. And being the genuine guy that he he just wanted to help, and he really felt for our situation. So thank you, mate.
Pleasure, mate.
He was just willing to hear what we'd been through, and at that time we were having some issues with our battery and the wiring, and, you know, the fact that we actually upgraded our batteries from the standard lead batteries to lithium. I bought the lithium batteries separately, but we did ask the caravan company to wire it for us, which is probably not a smart move. I don't recommend doing that, because often caravan companies are just designed to churn them out, and they don't necessarily put the attention to detail with the quality wiring and quality of work that someone like Jimmy would do. Do you want to share your experience of opening up our batteries and seeing the work that they'd done?
So poor Brad, they were obviously having electrical issues, and because the batteries had been moved to the back, what had happened was they just snipped all the cables that go to the batteries wherever they were, and then they'd just run extensions and used the yellow inline automotive crimps on smaller cables than 6 mil. So most of these cables going to the batteries were like 2.5 or 4 mil. And the other issue was that they had these small inline fuse holders on these, on all the circuits. And the issue with that is that really those fuse holders can't really handle much more than about 20 amps. And one of the circuits was drawing about 30 amps. I think that was going to your charger. Or having 30 amps going through it. So that had burnt out, and you'd just gotten it replaced, and you were having another issue, I think, at the time. So I had a look at it for you and said, basically, we need to do something about this, because you're just going to continue to have the same issue. And also, they do have an inverter, but the inverter was at the front of the van, so there was probably about a 6 or 7 metre run, maybe, of like 50 mil cable going to the inverter. You know, and if you're trying to pull at 12 volts, 120 plus amps through that cable, you know, it's not ideal. The run should be as short as possible. And also the batteries were outside. They were just in a, you know, what would you call it? The timber box, or the little toolbox.
There's a little built-in box that gets filled with dirt and rocks.
It was not ideal for the batteries, so we said we'll do something about that. And basically, we moved Brad's batteries back into the front of the van because he'd been able to take so much weight off the tow ball by moving stuff around in the van, and we got them in the front right near the inverter. They're looked after, they're actually secured properly now. They were just sort of bouncing around in there, and yeah, so now you haven't had any issues with the electrical side of it. It's all run smoothly. No fuses have burnt out because we've gone and put MIDI fuses in, good quality ones, and yeah, everything's been fine.
It's been mint, mate.
Yeah,
so
it's been good. Yep.
Before it was literally like a dog's breakfast, like with the wiring and everything just shoved in, and batteries bouncing around. They didn't like lock them into place properly, and as I said, we went up to Cape York and we've been on those corrugated roads, and yeah, they were bouncing around. Wasn't ideal, but yeah, Jimmy ended up redoing it all for us, all under the main bed, and the workmanship is like mint. And we haven't had an issue with that since, so that's been great. But I guess that's another tip to help you guys out is, make sure you just check their have a look at the wiring they've done and just check. If I had opened it up, I would have seen it was just a mess and just all shoved in. Just having taking that extra little bit of time, just look at the workmanship that they've done. And I just understanding more about, it's not ideal that the batteries are so far from the inverter, and little things like that as well.
Yep, sure. Yeah, and then even when it comes to charging as well, so charging from the car to charge your lithium or AGM batteries, we want to have them as close to the front where the connection is as possible. There are situations where you might have to have them down the back, but realistically you want to make sure you're running big enough cables and not through little tiny fuse holders that can only handle about 20 amps. So yeah, something to be aware of. Okay, so electrical wasn't good. Now you've had a few other issues on the road as well. Did you want to touch on them?
Yeah. So we'll never know if this was the cause of it, but because they moved one of the water tanks right to the back of the van. So when you're driving, a lot of the stress is towards the back of the van because obviously it's further back from the axle and there's more stress, more torque, or what's that word?
Yeah, I don't know if you could say there's more movement in the
back. Yeah. So more like bouncing and shuddering and all the rest of it, which if you're doing a lot of driving on corrugated roads, over time, it really builds up. So anyway, after doing the lap, we came back out, actually similar to the area where we met you guys, through, I don't know if you guys have been out sort of Winton, Longreach sort of way, but the roads are very sort of wavy, right? It's like constantly like this.
Gets a bit whoopy,
Yeah, that's the word. Anyway, I'm driving along and all of a sudden I look in there, I've got like one of those the safety Dave cameras, and I looked out of there and I caught a glimpse in the rear view, the side mirror as well. And I see smoke and steam and all sorts of shit pouring out the back of the van. I'm like, this isn't ideal. We're on a freeway, road trains coming past everywhere. It's a real narrow road too. So I slowed right down. I thought, what's this? Like something's either hanging off or something's broken or I've lost a wheel. I didn't know what it was. Slowed right down. I couldn't pull over and there's road trains coming the other way. So I had to just go slowly at 20 k's an hour around the corner. Pulled over as much as I could into the long grass and was not ideal at all. So I'm sort of half on the road still. And then I jump out of the car and walk back, and one of that water tank that they moved right to the back of the van had one of the brackets had snapped, and it was like laying like this. So half, like one end of it was on the road, and the other bracket was twisted like that, and it would literally burnt through I guess it's aluminium casing around the water tank to protect it, and then burnt through the plastic water tank, and all the water's gone out everywhere, and the bolt had twisted, and it was one of those really long bolts, and so I'm laying underneath the van with road trains screaming past, flicking up stones at me, and I had to try to get my shift up and undo the nut on it, which was all twisted. It took me probably 15 minutes of just like inch by inch, like just trying to get undone. I had to undo it all, got the water tank off, threw it in the back of the car, and then we only just got it fixed about 2 weeks ago. So this is probably 4 months ago, we lost that water tank, and literally just got it fixed. But what had happened is one of the brackets had snapped. So whether they'd under-engineered the bracket, it was too thin, I don't know. But my gut feeling is because it was further back in the van, it couldn't withstand those pressures.
Yeah, just fatigued over time, and obviously wasn't designed for purpose. Yeah,
exactly.
Being in that position.
Yeah,
probably.
that's it. Yep. So that was one thing that happened. The other thing that happened, which could have been a flow-on effect, and this is what happens when we do often when we do Band-Aid solutions, it can come back to bite us in the arse later on. So another thing with the Grip Sport bike rack, we had that on the far back of the van, sort of mounted to a bar. And I didn't even have 4 bikes, I had 2 bikes on it. So I had my bike, which is a big mountain bike, and my son's, which is like a medium-sized mountain bike. And we noticed probably 6 months into our trip that there was a huge crack forming in the bracket. I'm like, that's not great. And we noticed as well that when we're driving, looking in the rear view camera of the van, this movement, like it was just like wobbling like this as we're driving. I'm like, shit, that's not great. And then the crack started getting bigger and bigger. And not only that, when we were driving once, I saw the whole bike rack in the rear view camera drop like this. And one of the bolts had actually sheared through as well, through that stress. So one of the bolts, I replaced the bolts, but we still had that crack problem. And we ended up getting that welded up, which the company paid for, which was one good thing. But we got it reinforced. I had to actually adjust the Grip Sport bike rack. There's no way we could have 4 bikes on it, like they said. But now that we've adjusted it, pulled it in a little bit more, re-welded it, reinforced it, it's been all right. But yeah, that's probably a consequence of these Band-Aid solutions. You know, there's too much weight back there.
Yeah, and it was sort of just put on there thinking that, this will get them out of trouble, sort of get them out of our hair. But with a bit of hindsight and after your travels, you now realise that you can't put 4 bikes on it. Not that you had 4 on anyway, but if you were to see that now on a future van, you'd be like, no way, that's not going to work anyway. And it obviously comes with experience.
Yeah,
but
that's it.
The manufacturer just went ahead and put it on there for you to get you out of trouble.
Yeah, and to move us on basically. So there's been other things, like just a couple of little things with the taps. I have no idea why they do this, but the tap that they installed was just a standard tap that you would see, say, in a kitchen, you know, something not designed for movement. So it had an extra attachment where when you're driving, obviously there's movement, and it was like it created a weak link. So the tap broke within 2 months or something like that. So we replaced that with one at Bunnings, which is like one piece, and that way you haven't got that extra movement point. So yeah, they're the main things. We had a few little minor things, but leak in the roof, a few little things like that. But it was mainly the issues from the weights and the consequence or the flow-on effect of what that created later on.
Cause other issues, And another issue that I want to touch on too that Brad and I have ended up sorting out was because they moved the water tank all the way to the back, you guys can't select which water tank you can use, can you? No. It just draws from both at the same time. Because they'd done that, you had such a long run to the water tank, which was now at the back, and the issue was that the pump would only pick up from the front tank, so your back water tank would be full all the time. You could never empty it because it'd get an airlock in it.
And you get all those airlocks that would do their heads in because they'd be full with water, but you couldn't actually pull that water through because the distance was too long.
That's right. And so what we end up being on the road, we managed to figure out a solution, and we tried to shorten it as much as possible and change the T-piece, the way the T-piece was. But anyway, so that got that working. But definitely the moral of the story here is that if you're buying even a second-hand caravan, but a new or a second-hand caravan, to try and learn from some people's, what would you say, problems that they've had when they're going through the process themselves, I guess is, if you can take some key points with you so that you're aware and you can understand that these things can happen even though the manufacturer does stipulate that they've sorted all these issues out and, they say everything's going to be good like the salesman told you, So, they're not down on the factory floor looking at this stuff. So there's some major takeaways. Okay, so before we wrap up, I've got a couple of final questions to ask Brad here. And the first one is, would you have handled the situation with the manufacturer differently now?
Yeah, definitely. I think we would have been, in the early stages, like when leading up to putting a deposit on the van, we would have asked a lot more questions about the battery layout, about what we wanted to achieve with our objectives. We would have asked a lot more about where we wanted to put the bikes and, were we going to be okay with the weights in terms of the generator. And I would have actually asked to have direct communication with the manufacturer, or at least someone who had experience with managing weights, because the salesman clearly had no idea what he was talking about, and he just wanted to get a sign on the dotted line, which is fair enough, that's his role. But the biggest thing was don't take everything as fact or truth that they say to us just to get a sale. Yeah, do some research, especially like we keep talking about the last however long we've been chatting, is like checking the weights is number one. The distribution of weights, how much you want to put into your van, weighing it properly at a weigh bridge, those sort of things. I think that's the biggest takeaways, yeah.
Okay, no worries. Okay, so the next one is, what would you do differently if you were to purchase another van now?
I think in hindsight, we didn't do enough due diligence. So we didn't research the different caravan manufacturers, looking at reviews. We probably didn't spend enough time doing that. Every caravan manufacturer has some issues, but one thing I would be looking at a lot more next time would be, what is their follow-up service like? So some of them on the market can be really, really good at the sales process and getting you all excited and getting you pumped and motivated to purchase, put your deposit down. But if you look a little bit deeper into the most important thing, I believe, or at least equally important, is what's their follow-up care and service like. So if you do come across an issue on the road, which more than likely you will at some stage, what is their customer service like? What's their communication process like? And have customers who've been through that process, what do they say about it in terms of their overall experience?
Rightio, so to wrap up, Brad, thank you so much for your time and thank you for sharing. Do you have any special advice for anyone currently in the process of purchasing a new or second-hand caravan?
Yeah, I think, like we keep harping on, weights is a huge thing. So first of all, do some research to make sure that you have the right car, because a lot of people don't have the right car, especially if you've got a dual cab ute. Based on my experience, if you have a dual cab ute without a GCM upgrade and you've got a family of 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, you're going to really struggle to keep below those weights. So do some research on what type of car you need. If you do have a family, you may need to either get a GCM upgrade, or you may need something like a Land Cruiser or a car that's more capable of what you're going to purchase. They always say get your car right first and then buy a van second. So that's probably some advice that I'd have, to make sure your car is capable. When you get your van, just keep in mind that that weights go up very quickly. So personally, our van empty was around about 2.7 tonnes, something like that. If I was to look again, I'd probably aim to get something a little bit lighter with the tear weight, with the empty weight, because you don't have a lot of leeway. By the time you add all your things, your water and your food and everything that you want to put on board, then the weights add up super, super quickly. So I think a lower weight for the tear is ideal, and there are certain manufacturers where they're lighter than others. I know some people have brought a van which is around 3 tonne, just empty, like tear. So, and then once you add everything, you go over that 3.5 tonne mark very, very quickly. And that's a huge mistake, something that's irreversible, because you've gone through all that process. You pick up your car, you weigh it, and obviously ours could be fixed to a degree, but if everything was created as they stated, and now you're realizing that you're gonna have to survive on a couple of cartons of eggs and a litre of milk and nothing else.
Can't carry any water with you or anything
No
like
water,
that, yeah.
no jerry cans, no bikes, no surfboards, no paddle boards. It's like, is that going to be an enjoyable trip, right? Yeah. So I think weights is the biggest takeaway for me that I would really look into. So yeah, customer reviews. Know your weights. Jimmy's, I know you've got an amazing calculator online now where you can punch in all your weights. It's like genius. I wish I had that when I was learning, because you just literally put in all your weights, tells you whether you're above or below, and you get a really good idea of where things are at. Another tip as well is what we did. It's a little bit tedious, but we actually weighed every single item that we wanted to put on board. So I had my scales and I weighed the chairs and the boogie boards and the generator, and I actually had an Excel spreadsheet and I worked it all out, so I knew roughly where I was at, because once again, it gets out of control pretty quickly and adds up. So yeah, they're probably the main points. And in terms of communication, that's probably the last one that I'll leave it on, is make sure that you're on top of the salesperson, the manufacturer. Make sure you keep them honest on the ball, because quite often I like that saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. You know, they're dealing with a lot of people, but they're the customers that are more vocal and more active with their communication, you know, can give me an update, make sure you let me know if something happens. If the dates change, please let me know. If you're really on the ball with that communication, then they'll get back to you first out of everyone else, which means you get a better overall customer experience. So communication goes both ways. So I'd definitely recommend being on the ball with that. But yeah, just in closing, the best thing we ever did, it sounds like we've been through a lot of issues, but I would never take any of it back. 18 months on the road, life-changing on so many levels, letting go of our amazing 5-bedroom house with safety and security and all the things, letting go of all of that and just being on the road and meeting some incredible people like Jimmy and so many other families that are doing the same. And it's just taught us to be really grateful for the simple things and just to make the most of every second, because life's short. And we're going to continue our travels and our journeys, and it's been amazing.
Thanks, Brad. So the purpose of this video definitely wasn't to scare you off buying a new or second-hand caravan. It was just to give you some ideas so that you're aware of things to look at yourself when you go through the process. It's meant to be an enjoyable process, right? So you're going to travel in your caravan, it's all about good times, and we want the experience of buying that new or second-hand caravan to be exciting and fun for you guys as well. So I really do hope you got some great takeaways from Brad today. I know that I've learned a lot working with Brad and helping him fix these issues with his caravan, and I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your experience and your story, Brad. Very, very grateful. It is hard sometimes to come and talk about these sorts of things, but yeah, I'm extremely grateful that Brad would share his experience. Anyway, once again, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.
See you guys.